In the intricate labyrinth of human emotions, love often finds its way into the most forbidden corners. And so begins our tale, in a place where tradition holds sway and the rhythm of life takes on the cadence of the beating African sun. Meet our protagonist, a woman of quiet strength and grace, content in her world as a housewife in a small African village. Her days are filled with the humdrum of life, the comforting routine of cooking, cleaning, and caring for her family. Her husband, a man of honor and respect, is the pillar of their home, his presence as sure as the baobab tree that stands sentinel in their yard. Yet as the days turn into weeks and weeks into months, a subtle transformation begins to take place. It's not a change that's visible to the naked eye, but one that takes root in the innermost recesses of her heart. A friend of her husband begins to occupy her thoughts, his laughter echoing in her mind long after his visits, his words weaving a tapestry of dreams she had never dared to dream. She finds herself stealing glances at him when he visits, her heart fluttering like a caged bird every time their eyes meet. His presence fills her with a strange warmth, a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Yet she keeps these feelings to herself, locked away in the deepest chambers of her heart. There are no words spoken, no confessions made, just a tempest of emotions brewing within her, threatening to spill over and shatter the tranquility of her world. In the silence of the African nights, when the only sound is the distant call of the nightjar, she finds herself lying awake, her heart heavy with a secret. As the moon casts its silvery glow through the window, illuminating her solitary form, she gently whispers into the darkness. Her lips move silently, forming a name that isn't her husband's. A name that carries with it the promise of a love she dares not speak of. In the silence of the African nights, her heart whispered a name that wasn't her husband's. The heart, they say, wants what it wants. But what happens when the heart's yearning is in conflict with societal norms and personal commitments? This was the predicament faced by our protagonist, a married woman, deeply, irrevocably in love with another man who was, unfortunately, also married. A torrent of emotions had taken her captive, love, guilt, confusion, all intertwined, creating a storm in her soul. She was caught in a whirlwind of her own making, her feelings for this man growing stronger each passing day, while her commitment to her husband waned. An internal battle had begun. The woman, in her desperate attempts to suppress these feelings, found herself distancing from her husband, a man she once loved dearly. It was unintentional, almost subconscious, her actions driven by the turmoil within. Her husband, a kind-hearted, loving man, was not oblivious to this change. He noticed the growing chasm between them, the conversations that had turned into monosyllabic responses, the laughter that had lost its warmth, the eyes that no longer shone with affection. He sensed the change, the shift in the air, the unsaid words hanging heavy between them, but he couldn't put a finger on what was wrong. Was it something he had done, or was it something he hadn't? The questions haunted him as he grappled with the unexplained distance. Our protagonist, meanwhile, was caught in a vice of her own emotions. She was torn between her feelings for her lover and the guilt of betraying her husband. The confusion was overwhelming, the guilt suffocating. She tried to suppress her feelings, to push them into the deepest recesses of her heart. But love, as we know, has a mind of its own. It resurfaced time and again, stronger, more potent, impossible to ignore. She was fighting a battle within herself, a battle she was losing. The heart, they say, wants what it wants, and her heart, it seemed, had made its choice. Sometimes the truth is like a wild beast. It needs to be set free. In a moment of tormented silence, she found her voice. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. She confessed her feelings for his friend, the married man who had stolen her heart. It wasn't planned, she explained, her voice trembling with the weight of her admission. It was a fire that had ignited without warning, a love that had grown in the clandestine corners of her heart. Her husband, a man of few words, listened in stunned silence. His eyes, once warm and welcoming, turned cold, a stark contrast against the dimly lit room. The news hit him like a ton of bricks. It was a blow that shook him to his core. He had loved her, cherished her, built a life with her. And now, she was confessing her love for another man, his friend no less. His heart pounded in his chest as the reality of the situation washed over him. He could feel the walls of his world crumbling around him. His wife, the woman he had shared his dreams with, was in love with another man. His friend, the man he had trusted, had betrayed him. His response was swift and decisive. He demanded she leave. His voice, usually calm and steady, cracked with the pain of his words. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The damage was done, and their shared life seemed to shatter in an instant. She looked at him, her eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. But all she saw was the hurt reflected back at her. With a heavy heart, she packed her bags. She moved slowly. Every item she picked up was a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. As she closed the suitcase, her eyes welled up with tears. The enormity of her decision weighed heavily on her. She was leaving the life she had known, the man she had married, for a love that was as uncertain as it was intense. With a heavy heart, she packed her bags, her eyes welling up with tears and regrets. Love, in its most raw form, is a powerful force that can make or break us. In a whirlwind of feelings and emotions, our protagonist finds herself in a new home, a new life. She is now living with the man she has fallen deeply for. This man, who is not her husband, but rather someone else's. The walls around her are unfamiliar, the bed she sleeps in is not hers, and the life she now leads feels like a borrowed one. Yet she finds solace in his arms. His voice has become her refuge and his love, her sanctuary. She is drawn to him like a moth to the flame, knowing well the consequences of her actions. She is torn, caught between this illicit love that sets her heart aflame and the life she left behind, a life where she played the dutiful wife and caring mother. Her heart pounds in her chest as she wakes up every morning next to him, the man she loves but should not. The guilt gnaws at her, a constant reminder of her betrayal. She sees her reflection in the mirror and cannot recognize the woman staring back at her. She yearns for the comfort of the familiar, the routine of her old life, but she knows she can never go back. She is now a woman in love, a woman in forbidden love. The passion she feels for this man is unlike anything she has ever felt before. It's intoxicating, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. She treads carefully, knowing that every step she takes is a step towards the unknown. She has left behind a life of certainty for a love that is uncertain. She has chosen to walk a path that is not only less traveled but also forbidden. She had chosen the path of love, but it was a path strewn with thorns. She walks this path with trepidation, hoping that the love she has chosen will be worth the pain. Every thorn she steps on is a reminder of her choices, of her forbidden love. In the grand scheme of life, every decision has its consequences. The aftermath of our protagonist's choice was no different. She had plunged headlong into a new chapter of her life, leaving behind the familiar comfort of her old existence. Yet, the reality of her new life with her lover was not the paradise she had envisioned. In the solitude of her thoughts, she found herself reminiscing about her old life. The echoes of laughter that once filled her home, the shared glances with her husband, the comforting rhythm of routine. She missed the sense of belonging, the warm embrace of her community that she had once taken for granted. And in the quiet corners of her heart, she felt the twinge of regret, a longing for the life she had left behind. But life, as it often does, continued to unfurl its complexities. The whispers of her affair had reached the ears of her lover's wife. A storm of emotions was brewing, ready to wreak havoc on the lives entangled in this intricate web of love and deceit. The fallout was imminent, the repercussions severe. Her lover, a man caught between his duty and his heart, was torn. His wife, a woman scorned, was a tempest of rage and betrayal. And our protagonist, the catalyst of this upheaval, was caught in the eye of this storm. She had desired love, craved the exhilarating thrill of passion, but had she bargained for the chaos that ensued? In this new reality, she found herself navigating the rough seas of guilt and remorse, battling the waves of regret that threatened to pull her under. The aftermath of her decision was a stark reminder of the price she had paid for love. She had leapt into the abyss of love, only to find herself drowning. Love, it seemed, was not just about the heady intoxication of desire, but also about the bitter pill of consequence. And she was left to swallow it, alone in the aftermath of her choices. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters. These words echoed in her mind as she stood at the crossroads of her life. The woman, entangled in a web of her own desires, began to see things clearly for the first time. Her heart was a battlefield and her emotions, the warring soldiers. She was a married woman, in love with a married man. And in this moment of clarity, she realized the gravity of her actions. She thought back to her marital home, the one she had left behind. It was a place of warmth, of comfort, of familiarity. She remembered her husband's gentle smile, his unwavering support, and his unconditional love. He was a man who had stood by her side through thick and thin, always willing to go that extra mile to make her happy. And in her pursuit of a forbidden love, she had left him behind. Her lover, the man she had left her husband for, was not the man she thought he was. The romanticized version of him, created by her infatuation, began to crumble. His charm was but a facade, a thin veil that concealed his true nature. He was a man of many words but few actions, a man who promised the world but delivered nothing. She realized that she was living in a mirage, a world that existed only in her fantasies. The reality was harsh, cold, and unyielding. She had traded a life of stability and love for a life of uncertainty and deceit. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but swallow it she must. She decided to end this charade, to leave her lover and return to her husband. She yearned for the comfort of her home, the familiarity of her husband's embrace, and the warmth of his love. She wanted to make amends, to right the wrongs she had done, to salvage what was left of her marriage. Her heart ached with regret, but she knew she had to make things right. Forgiveness is not just about the other person, it's about freeing oneself from the chains of the past. And so, the woman found herself standing at the doorstep of her own home, a place she had left behind in pursuit of a love that was never really hers. Her heart pounded in her chest, echoing the rhythm of her profound regret. Yet, she mustered the courage to knock on the door, the same door she had once crossed, leaving behind the man who had promised to love and cherish her in sickness and in health. She was greeted by the familiar face of her husband, a face that had aged with time and sorrow. His eyes, once filled with the vibrant colors of love, were now a canvas of hurt and betrayal. She looked into those eyes and said the words she had rehearsed over and over. "I'm sorry, I'm truly, deeply sorry." Her voice broke, but her eyes held his gaze. She wasn't asking for forgiveness because it was the easy way out. She was asking because she understood the depth of her mistakes, because she knew she had broken something precious, and because she was willing to spend the rest of her life mending it. The husband, a man of few words, looked at her, his eyes searching for the woman he had once known, and in that moment he saw her. Not the woman who had left him for another, but the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he had vowed to stand by. And so, he reached out, taking her hands in his. His forgiveness wasn't a sign of weakness, but a testament to his strength, his love, and his ability to see beyond the mistakes of the past. He forgave her, not only for her peace, but for his own, for his heart still held a place for her, for his love for her was unwavering. In the end, love had led her astray, but it was also love that brought her back home. In the grand canvas of life, every ending is a new beginning. The words echo, resonating with a profound truth. A truth that our protagonist, the woman, comes to understand as she embarks on a journey of renewal with her husband. It's a journey of rediscovery, of rekindling a love that had once seemed lost in the labyrinth of unspoken desires and forbidden love. They start afresh, leaving the past where it belongs, in the past. They mend the shards of their broken bond piece by piece, weaving a tapestry of forgiveness, understanding, and renewed commitment. Their love story doesn't bear the marks of a fairy tale romance. It's real, raw, and sometimes rough around the edges. But it's their story. A story of a love stronger than before, resilient in the face of trials. A love that chose to stay, to fight, to heal, and to grow. A love that chose to forgive, and in forgiving found a new lease on life. Meanwhile, the woman's relationship with her lover unravels, ending on a bitter note. But there's no regret, no looking back. Only the clarity of a decision made, a path chosen. She had danced with temptation, toyed with the fire of illicit love, but in the end, she chose her home, her husband, her love. She finds contentment not in the thrill of the forbidden, but in the familiarity of the chosen, in the shared laughter, the quiet conversations, the tender moments of everyday life. In the arms of the man she had vowed to love and cherish, she finds her safe harbor. She had journeyed through a tumultuous sea of emotions, only to find her safe harbor in the arms of the man she had vowed to love and cherish. This is not the end of their story, but rather a new beginning. A beginning born out of the ashes of the past, promising a future brighter, stronger, and more beautiful than ever before.